Radio AM
want to don't talk while this is on, because I think one time the guy forgot to shut the mics off.
Yeah.
I think Corey knows what he's doing,
from
right,
the
Corey?
historic Peacock Alley American Grill and Bar in downtown.
So, yeah.
Even
the
if he
National
does, though,
Cattlemen's
it's
Association
good
Beef Innovator of the Year. You're about to find out what's happening in the North Dakota legislative session. Your host of the Legislature Today is Dale Wetzel, managing editor of Great Plains News and the Great Plains Examiner. If you have questions or comments or to watch the show, go to GreatPlainsNews.com. GreatPlainsNews.com. The Legislature Today is brought to you by the North Dakota Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties, the Credit Union Association of the Dakota, the University of Mary, the North Dakota Corn, Soybean and Grain Growers Association, and the North Dakota
fun.
Ethanol
I think
Council.
it'd be fun if
the
he's out here. I think he's out here tomorrow. Let's ask you to be on the show.
Touchstone Energy Cooperative,
I'd love
North
it.
Dakota
I'm
Rural
serious
Electric
about that.
Cooperatives
Get him, Steve,
Association,
come on.
and members
I will.
Minnesota Power
I mean, he's
and
supposed to be
Great
around.
River
You're going to
Energy.
sit and trash
The
us,
North
so.
Dakota chapter of
That's okay.
Concerned Women for America.
Then he'll know really
the
who's
Agree
behind it.
Restway Inn and
Pre-recording.
Suites, where a good night's rest costs less, and the Peacock Alley.
There we go.
It's time to get started. Another hour of the Legislature Today is on the air.
This is Dale Wetzel. This is the Legislature Today radio program. We're coming to you from the Peacock Alley American Bar and Grill in downtown Bismarck, Dakota. And we're sitting here with a plate of spinach and artichoke dip and some Melba toast and some crackers here. It's a new frontier. It's almost like the Food Network. I also have a bunch of extremely annoying feedback in my ears. So please excuse me if I sound a bit strange. Maybe I sound strange anyway. Anyway, for the first half hour, we're going to be speaking about the animal cruelty legislation in the North Dakota legislature. It is going to go to conference committee, which means that a group of House members and senators will be working out the final details of the bill. The bill's sponsor, originally it was recommended to happen that the bill get final approval in the Senate today and go its merry way to the governor. But the sponsor of the bill, Senator Tim Flacco, he's a Republican from Fargo. He didn't like the final shape that the bill was in, and he was able to overturn that action. And so we're going to have more negotiations on the animal cruelty bill, and we have some folks here to talk about that. Among them are Senator Flacco himself. We have Julie Ellingson, who is the director of the Dakota Stockmen's Association, and we also have Senator Joe Miller, who's a Republican from Park River, and the chairman of the Senate Agriculture Committee. First of all, let's go through a little bit about what happened in the legislature today. First of all, there was the matter about the animal cruelty bill, and we'll talk about that in more detail in a moment. We also had in the Senate approval of new legislation to toughen the penalties for driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs. That isn't the final word on this bill. We're going to have some House and Senate negotiations on the final shape of that bill as well. But right now, where it stands is there is a mandatory 2-day jail sentence or 20 hours of community service if someone who is a first offender in DUI, and if that person had a blood alcohol content of 0.18% or greater, that person will be eligible for a 2-day mandatory jail sentence and 20 hours community service if convicted. The mandatory fine for a first offender has also been doubled from $250 to $500. And there's also a new category of something called criminal vehicular homicide. Now, this is if someone is drunk, legally drunk, and runs into someone and kills them. That is a minimum sentence of 3 years in prison. In a second offense, you'd have to serve at least 10 years in prison. This is if you're under the influence and you cause a fatality accident or you're in a fatality accident. If you cause serious injury, if you're a drunken driver and cause a serious injury, that would be also a felony, which you'd be obliged to serve at least 1 year in prison. And a second offense, it would be at least 2 years in prison. There's considerable debate about whether these changes are tough enough for trying to deter drunken driving on the roads. There's a number of legislators who say these penalties should be harsher. but it does run up against the calculus that if we do have extremely harsh penalties against DUI, particularly against first offenders, that we're going to have to build more county jail cells and hire more prosecutors. There's another matter which kind of falls under maybe the amusement category. The State Historical Society's budget, which was passed by the Senate today, includes $100,000 to purchase the Lawrence Welk Farmstead. Now, this is a place. It's about 6 acres. I've been there. It's a really quite interesting period piece. It shows you how people lived in North Dakota in the 1920s. It's just to the little bit west of Strasburg in south central North Dakota. And it has a summer kitchen, a carriage house, and a barn, and, of course, the main home. And then there's a privy, which is labeled as such. You can tour the location by appointment. The legislation says that there are some repairs that need to be done to the homestead, and that these will be determined before the state purchases it and takes it over for $100,000. Now, this is not a done deal yet. This may come out in later action on this budget, but it is interesting perhaps to know that one of the things your tax dollars may be doing is buying the old home place of Mr. Lawrence Welk, the king of Champagne music. And there earlier in the session, there was some derision because of a decision by the North Dakota House to endorse a $2.8 million purchase of a ski resort in northeastern North Dakota near Walhalla. Now, that has been taken out of the legislation that it was in, which is in the budget bill of the State Parks and Rec Department, and we'll see whether that happens. And in the category of frankly of shameless media self-promotion, there was a Special Olympics fundraiser today at the state capitol in the Memorial Hall. Essentially it's a competition between groups of lobbyists and state elected officials and legislators, and there is a rather lowly press team, and we shoot baskets at a little basketball goal. It's the kind of thing you see in bars where you have small basketballs and you try to make baskets through a little hoop. And the press team, the winning team, first of all, was a team of lobbyists, and included in the team was John Gottfried of the Greater North Dakota Chamber of Commerce, who is about 6'10" and just a huge guy, and has no problem making.
Just reach over and drop them in
making baskets. And we have Dale Nieswag, who is a lobbyist for Basin Electric Power Cooperative, and we also had Dave Straley, who's a lobbyist for North American Coal Corporation. And these guys were smoking hot, and we were in the finals with them, the press team, and they just kicked our you-know-whats. But it was a successful event, raised money for Special Olympics, and it's a lot of fun. And it was interesting because the press team doesn't usually make it to the finals. Let's just put it that way.
Well, I think if Dave Thompson would have been there, you would have won that.
This is true. Dave Thompson, the news director of Prairie Public, the public radio station here in town, he was on the team. In fact, he was listed in the program, but he was unable to be on the team because he unexpectedly had to anchor the noon news at Prairie Public, and so we had as a extremely able and capable substitute Ms. Retha Clokleisure-Mattern, who is a reporter and the assistant news director at KFYR Television.
So Dave didn't get like a call up from the Miami Heat or anything?
No, he didn't. He did not. Now let's get down to business here. The animal cruelty legislation. First of all, Senator Flackel, could you please tell us what the bill does now in terms of punishing people who commit cruel acts to animals, and what was it about the final bill that you didn't like and you wanted changes to?
Well, it's a pretty complex bill, so we're not sure if we'll get to all that in a short amount of time, Dale. But essentially, if you look at, there's a couple of different categories, like as an example, neglect, which would be a misdemeanor. There would be abuse and cruelty, which would be a felony, as the bill came to us. And I think that will probably be something that will stay as we move forward on that. As I talked about some comments on the floor today. I don't think that the committee will really have any success in looking at changing any of those to either move it one way or the other. I've been in a situation where a lot of times when in doubt, send it to the conference committee, hear what they did, why they did it, and go from there. And one thing that I think we all can appreciate and all can agree on is everyone's heart is in the right place on this issue. And there may be differences of opinion in terms of how we should go about that, what should be covered. And certainly language is a discussion, because when we try to put into legal terms in bills what we want and think is appropriate, those sometimes require a couple bites at the apple, as it were. So we've had some modifications. The House made some positive changes in terms of some of the things they did. I think we're all in agreement in terms of the bill today, regardless of if we were to pass the bill as it is, or if we were to pass the Senate bill, would be stronger legislation than what we currently have on the books. Because currently we have no felony requirement on the or felony conviction ability on the books. The House did a number of good things, and some of these are because more eyes are looking at them, more thought is thrown out there. And so that's why I thought, whether it's, we call it the red lobster provision in there, because the question came kind of on the floor today, what's culinary arts? Why, how are they singled out? Well, that's, for the lobsters that are waiting anxiously in the tank at Red Lobster some days,
To be boiled alive.
So there's a few different things. They talked about ornamental animals. I know there were some questions, what did that mean? That was added in the House. And those, I think, are generally, perceived as, helping to define better what we're looking at. So there's, certainly a lot of agreement on this bill.
When someone said ornamental animals to me, I thought it was we're talking about pink flamingos or something, or some kind of yard inanimate object.
No, not inanimate object, but, you've had situations where, it could be peacocks. Actually, there are some situations where, I always, one of the things I thought of was like Bulingo cattle, that have the belt. They're a cross between a dairy animal and a Galloway. Those, for some people, are
Oreo cattle. Yes.
Yeah, Oreos. Yeah, are kind of in that category. So there's a few different things that can be categorized as such.
Ms. Ellingson, what is the Stockmen's Association's interest in this whole procedure?
The Stockmen's Association was part of the initial working group that helped draft and create Senate Bill 2211, a working group that included farmers and ranchers, veterinarians, the Board of Animal Health, the Ag Department, as well as some local pet shelters and the local zoo. Our thought was really important that we took a look at our existing animal treatment statute, identified where there were some gaps and some holes, and to fill those gaps again, to yield a piece that protects animals and also protects folks like my members who take care of them every day.
What is the opinion of the bill as it stands presently? Would you have been satisfied with that?
No, we're very pleased with the product and the process that we've gone through to get to where we are. We did ask for the Senate to not concur. There are a couple of changes that were made on the House side that we think that we can improve upon. Again, we're very, very grateful to have gotten to this place in this legislation, and to know that the legislative process is a dynamic one. And so there's a couple of key areas, though, that we think that we could more clearly define and do a more explicit job of providing those exemptions in areas particularly to protect animal agriculture.
And can you give us some detail on what you're talking about in terms of things you think can be improved?
Right. There is a list, of course, of the different mistreatment types that are defined. Along with those definitions, they're accompanied with an enumerated list of appropriate exemptions. In the early phases of the bill, it talked about usual and customary practices in production agriculture and aspects of the livestock industry. And that definition was changed to a little bit more vague in our view to usual and customary practices in the production of feed, food, fiber, and ornament. We think it's really important that we are very explicit about the role of livestock and production agriculture in that exemption, as we look to some usual and customary practices that are important to my members, like branding and castrating and dehorning. And so that's one of the areas that we think we could improve upon. A simple change, we think, that shouldn't be controversial, but has major implications, though, in how it's viewed in the end.
Senator Miller, where does this go from here in terms of what does happen to the bill now?
Well, I've appointed a conference committee, and we'll be conferring with the House probably next week on the bill. Maybe even, well, it's most likely probably on Tuesday next week. And we're going to look at what we can do to meet the desires of the Stockmen's Association and try and iron out those differences. When I read the bill, I mean, there's always things that you're not so sure on, and the bills, anything we pass is never perfect. That's just human nature. But when I read what the House sent over to us, I feel that it's strong language. I think it's more encompassing than what we sent over to the House. So that's kind of my disagreement with Julie is the term feed, fiber, food, ornament. I think that's a good phrase. But I think we've talked about it, and I think we've figured out something that'll work. So we'll address both concerns. My major concern has always been defense of animal agriculture and the rights of which we already have and always, I believe, should have. I mean, I grew up farm. I'm a farmer. I grew up around animals, and that's my major concern. And when you get into this legalese, I think there's a fear on both sides that we just don't want to paint ourselves into a corner, and so we want to make sure that we embrace what needs to be done to protect animal agriculture.
Do you think that the conference committee has a difficult job, or is this going to take not very much time to work things out?
I think we can get this done relatively quickly. There's always a group of people out there that aren't going to like something and want more, but the people that I appointed and the folks I'm confident the House will appoint are orientated on resolving this quickly, and they understand what needs to be done. We don't want to open up this into a huge another debate, another discussion, another hearing. That's not what this is about. We're going to have in the bill a time period for analysis and study of what we've done, and so in 2 years we'll come back, and if any changes need to be made or additions need to be made, we'll do that then. But at this point, I think and really the concerns that the Stockmen's Association brought forward with the Farmers Union, we can deal with them really easy. I think we got it already figured out. But I just to add, my opinion is it's not needed. But
Senator Flacco, how do you think that the process here has worked, and do you think it's going to be sufficient to deter the possibility of another initiated measure on this subject?
Well, I think the process has been really a great one. When you think, and we need to remember that the working group of about 16 or 18 very broad-based people that deal with the animal industry, whether it's a Stockmen's Association or people that deal with zoos, just a whole host of people. We also incorporated state's attorneys because they're the ones that ultimately have to do the prosecution, so we have to kind of provide that balance. I think it's been a tremendous process, and if you really think about it, they were doing their good work and really grinding away months before Measure 5 was brought forward. So they are the ones that I think really deserve the great deal of gratitude in this. They have really provided, the scrubbing, and it's a continual process. And I think, it's okay. We have about, 15 days left for the legislative session. And I think it's okay to kind of continue to work to try to come up with the best product. We're not about coming up with the fastest product. We're, about the best product. And in some cases it may be, the state's attorneys, they tell us that they actually prefer current law with respect to seizure of animals that is currently on the books as opposed to the bill that we were looking at today. So there's a few things. I think there's a couple things that probably need to be worked out, and that's where the onus is on those who wanted to send it to conference committee. Identify those select areas, and it's not open this whole thing up again. Identify those select areas, and put up or shut up time for us is come up with some solutions, topics, and language that correspondingly can do this. There's talk about unwelcome animals. I got from everything from a Red Angus producer today talking about that, and looking at how that could be better suit their needs. Extreme pain, definition, or that terminology is in there. And extreme pain to me may be very different than extreme pain to you. If you think of going to a dentist, there's two things that come up. What's extreme pain? I used to work with a guy named Al Misek who never got Novocaine shot when he had his teeth worked on, with the drills and everything. I could have never thought about that. I mean, extreme pain for us was totally different.
Payloaders.
Payloaders in the case of Senator Miller, yes. That would be about as extreme as you could ever encounter. And then willfully doing something versus intentionally do something. And, using a dentist analogy, I just had a tooth pulled, and they have to sign off this, say, we could break your jaw, literally. But they didn't do it, they didn't do it on purpose. But, how do they, people know when they're doing something that, it will result in a broken bone, as an example. So the intentionally, do I tend to break a bone? I don't, that's a little higher burden of proof. So, I think those are some of the things that will have to be worked on as, and we're coming together on this thing. And I believe that, the committee, the conference committee on both sides will act in the best interest. And I'm not, I'm a realist, and I'm not holding out hope for perfect in my mind, because what's perfect in my mind would be different than even perfect in Julie's mind, and her what perfect might be different than her board chair of Stockmen's Association, which might be different than the previous board chair, and so on and so forth. So, but we have to try to find some middle ground that really does protect both people that have animals and the animals themselves.
One of the things that I hear quite often, and I'm sure Ms. Ellickson, that this is something that you hear as well, is that stockmen, these animals are their living. They have no motive or incentive to abuse a beef cow or a dairy cow, because you're essentially damaging your own livelihood, and they're a little bit baffled at the idea that this would be a problem.
And that's the very reason why the Stockmen's Association was part of this working group and has invested so much time and energy into this bill. It's very important to us that the language is precise, and so we create a very clear distinction between acts of mistreatment and the usual and customary practices that we use to take care of our animals every day.
And the other thing, Dale, and I think we'll all agree on this too, there are certain individuals that have done or may do things that will be ordered by the court, to go through a mental evaluation. And you could argue with great merit that in some cases, some of the horrendous things, whether it's putting an animal in a microwave to gluing a cat to a highway, you can't be fully functional, I don't think, mentally, if you're doing something like that. So those are essentially outside of this piece of legislation.
Okay. We've been talking to Senator Tim Flackel. He is the sponsor of the animal cruelty legislation that is before the North Dakota Legislature. He's a Republican from Fargo. Other guests in this half hour of the legislature today were Ms. Julie Ellingson. She's the director of the North Dakota Stockmen's Association, and Mr. Joe Miller, Senator Joe Miller, Republican from Park River and the chairman of the Senate Agriculture Committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now